Good morning. The first reading is from Ecclesiastes, chapter 4, verses 9 through 12, and the children's sermon really related to this passage. You'll find out when I read it, but it goes right along with it. Two are better than one because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up the other. But woe to one who is alone and falls, and does not have another to help. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though one may prevail against another, two will withstand one. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. And one of my favorite passages, and one of my dad's favorite, reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 15. As my Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. May these words be to us our light and our life. Thanks be to God.
What a joyful day it is to be together this morning. A day to celebrate, a day to gather together to remember that we depend on one another. I love coming from a large family who I can depend on. My mom's side is scattered throughout the country, from New York City to North Carolina to Kentucky and everywhere in between. My cousins range in age from 21 to 47. They are nurses and speech pathologists and consultants and veterinarians, and needless to say, it's hard to get us all together. So when we were able to gather for a weekend this past August, it was an absolute gift. Cornhole and kayak adventures and late nights spent catching up, campfires and s'mores, meals for 35 people. The whole thing felt like a movie. It was such perfection. My cousins have kids that I was meeting for the very first time that weekend, and as we all know, 4-year-olds are simultaneously the most affectionate and most fickle friends you can make. My husband Greg befriended my cousin's son Liam, and they were two peas in a pod all weekend long. They played iPad games together. They rode a stand-up paddleboard together. And when all the cousins got together to play a game of volleyball with one of those giant beach balls, of course Liam was right by Greg's side. Liam, as a 4-year-old, was about a third the height of the grown-ups playing the game, so he needed a little help. I thought I'd offer him an assist, so I'd take this high-flying ball, and I would grab it and I'd kind of hit it low to him, and then hit it back up in the air so he kind of maybe felt like he had hit it, so it would sail right over the net. I thought I was clever, but this was not acceptable to him. Greg, though, who could do no wrong, Greg had the right idea. He picked Liam up and put him on his shoulders and used him as a kind of human baseball bat for the beach ball. Liam shrieked with glee every time the ball came at him and he got to hit it back over with his face or with his chest, or it didn't matter. My help felt like help, but Greg's help felt like he could do it. It was empowering. Liam was just so delighted to feel like he was hitting that beach ball all by himself. From a tiny, tender age, we long for independence, for proof that we can do it, that we don't need any help, that we are strong and self-sufficient and capable. And it is good to be independent. I've listened to parents wax poetic about the joy of that day that their kid is able to take themselves to the bathroom. the day that your kid learns to do their own laundry, even with the pang of sadness that comes from their departure when they head off into the world. Parents are excited to watch young adults launch themselves into the independence of adulthood, job hunting and rent paying and all. We speak proudly about octo and nonagenarians still living in their homes. We marvel at their independence. Yes, there is dignity in independence. There is satisfaction. There is often joy. When we have agency over the trajectory of our lives, we can fully participate in God's work of transformation and love within ourselves and the world. But there's another side to independence too, the side that demands that we do it all alone. The side that preferences achievement over connection, the side that tells us to look out for ourselves, not to worry about other people. Nancy read for us 2 passages from Scripture that push back against the idea that independence is the best way to be. They come from very different timelines. Ecclesiastes is a Hebrew Bible text from the writings, or the wisdom literature, a tale penned by King Solomon sharing the lessons he learned from his life experiences and mistakes he made. Written sometime between 450 and 180 BCE, this is an ancient reflection from a king. A king who, even though he was the most powerful person he knew, still advised, 2 are better than 1. In the Gospel of John, the writer is very different, technically anonymous, but probably a 3rd revision of reflections from one of Jesus' disciples. Not a king at all. Part of a group that was persecuted and that was in the process of forming their own community. The book was written somewhere around 100 AD, separated from Ecclesiastes by centuries and a whole lot of history. Yet this writer too felt it was important to impart this particular teaching from Jesus. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. A king from Old Testament times and an early Christian church dreamer come to the same conclusion. We might want to go it alone, but life is better in community. Independence is just fine, but interdependence in community is a call. As our culture becomes increasingly focused on the individual, the value of interdependence is not always clear. But one place where we make it abundantly clear is the church. When a baby is born, the deacon squad gets together to organize meals for the growing family. When a person dies, another team rushes into place to host the reception. When we need a listening ear, a non-judgmental word of advice or comfort, we turn to one another in a spirit of trust. When a pair of us decide to get married, we celebrate. The love of this community is put into action when we rely on one another. As we begin our season of stewardship today, it's no small thing to notice the web of connection between us and know that each one of our gifts is used by God to make all of this happen. The countercultural, sometimes radical effort of community building is certainly God's work, and it is alive and well here at Mac Plymouth. Our world needs interconnectedness and interdependence more than ever. God's web of connection brings us close today to celebrate a marriage 31 years in the making. Darlene and Scotty met at a fishing competition in 1986, and their love was pretty instantaneous. Each of them was independent, living rich and full lives in their own right. And yet there was space for one another. Joining their lives together made everything better than it was before. Darlene's masterful campfire cooking was better when she had someone to share those roasted artichokes with. Scotty's gardening was more fulfilling with a partner to sit out on the patio and marvel at the beauty with. At a time when it was not safe to be public about your sexual orientation if you were gay or lesbian, Darlene and Scotty found refuge in their love for one another and in their garden sanctuary, where they could be fully themselves together. Gardening is a lasting passion for these two, and I learned recently, as I lamented my own intense weeding project in my backyard, that it's actually better for your garden to leave some weed roots in the ground. Do you guys know that? I think that's really great news. These weed roots stabilize the soil, and they decompose underground to create a better environment for the beautiful stuff to thrive. Darlene and Scotty say that the hard things make them stronger. And that, I believe, is why God calls us to interdependence. We can try to go it alone, but when the hard stuff hits, we need people to help us pull the weeds and endure that painful period of decomposition, and then walk with us as we blossom from that newly fertile soil. Life is richer when we open ourselves up to community, whether that's with a partner or a neighborhood, a support group, or a circle of friends. Wherever we find community, we find mutual understanding and challenge and care and love, where we can be vulnerable, weeds and all. Darlene and Scotty have found that love in one another, and they found it together here at Mac Plymouth. In their union, we are reminded that we belong to one another because we belong to God. Anytime we feel like we have to go it alone, we can look for God face to face in community. Anytime we think we're doing it all by ourselves, we probably have a community to thank for lifting us up on their shoulders. God calls us to interdependence. That doesn't mean that we can't be our own people, but it does mean that we have the joyful and challenging responsibility of loving one another well. And the good news is, we never have to go it alone. Thanks be to God. Amen.